Hello, today is Monday, March 2nd. Welcome to episode 564 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Advisory Board Lester Munson. I'm joined today by founder and executive director Jamil Jaffer and senior fellow Morgan Vigna. Folks, we're going to talk about the big news, which is U.S. and Israeli action against Iran this weekend and ongoing as we speak. The Ayatollah is dead. Many members of Iranian senior leadership are dead. The U.S. is hitting targets across Iran. Israel is doing the same. There's a lot of developments regarding the position of Sunni Arab states in the neighborhood, regarding our European allies, who none of whom initially were supporting U.S. and Israeli action, but now it would appear, at least appears to me, and we may talk about this, that a lot of our friends and allies in the world are coming around to the U.S. side and supporting the strike against the Tehran regime. So to level set a little bit, going back to 1979, just briefly, which is some of my first memories of foreign policy, Iranian revolutionaries took American diplomats hostage, held them for 444 days, humiliated President Carter and the United States. And ever since then, Iran has been a terrible actor on the world stage and has been a huge problem for U.S. foreign policy. It has bedeviled a series of American presidents, from Carter to Reagan with the Iran-Contra scandal, through the Bush administration, Obama, who made a very, in my opinion, a very bad nuclear deal with Iran, through the first Trump administration, the Biden administration, which certainly didn't handle Iran well at all. Iran metastasized across the region, supporting Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis. But now, in the second Trump administration, we may be seeing the end of this regime. The Ayatollah is dead. We're not sure what's going to happen next. But this is a historic series of events just in the last 48 hours or so. Morgan, let's go to you first. Talk about what maybe the more immediately, what's happening on the ground and what's likely to happen next. What kind of Iran are we going to see on the other end of this?
Thanks, Les. Well said. First of all, you're right. Iran, this regime has played games with the United States and with our partners and allies across the region for decades. I, of course, remember when I know the three of us were on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and Iran continued to just play games and play all these delay tactics and try to wait the United States out, and finally, at the end of the day, the Trump administration just was not buying it. And I think the regime just ran out of time here. As National Security Advisor, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, they were just playing too many games, and quote, they found out, right? And so I'm not shocked that it finally came to this, because it was only a matter of time, right? Before a U.S. administration put them in their place. And so right now we see in Iran, particularly Tehran, in flames. We also see celebrations across the country, across the diaspora community, worldwide. There's true jubilation at the demise of Khamenei and his thugs. But what happens next, right? Will the regime fall? This was a decapitation operation, true. At the same time, the Iranian repressive power structure has extensive and very deep ties throughout the country, throughout the bureaucracy, and it runs very deep. In addition to celebrations for Khamenei's assassination or killing, we also saw people in the streets mourning him. So what does this say? And so I think moving forward, we're really going to need to see how the Iranian people sees this opportunity. When President Trump announced that, Khomeini was killed in the strikes, he basically said, this is your chance. for the Iranian people, take charge, seize this opportunity that we have, provided for you. That's a lot easier said than done. I surely hope that we are working with, people on the ground, opposition leaders on the ground, to try to see how we can shift Iran to a more stable and democratically led form of government. I also think, though, that the opposition is highly fragmented, and there is no clear leader that we see here. So what we can say, what is for certain, is that the regime is irreparably changed. There's no going back to Khomeini and, a theocratic form of government. With that said, I think we are still very much in the thick of this, and we will need to see how the Iranian people respond, how the United States leverages its assets in the country and in the region, and it's going to be day by day. So I'm sure we'll be talking about this in many episodes to come.
Jamil, I note you're wearing your Trump tie today. For those who are listening and not watching the YouTube video, this is a little unusual. Let me give you kind of a serious question. And Morgan started talking about this a little bit. How is what we're seeing unfolding in Iran right now different than what the United States and the so-called coalition of the willing did in Iraq back in 2003? And I'll just give you a jumping off point. Neil Ferguson, the great British historian, said this is not regime change, it's regime alteration. So do we have a good tailor here? And what is the suit going to look like when we're done? That was
I think there's a couple of differences. Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Alteration joke, but I think the question here, the issue here, obviously, is that we're not going in on the ground, right? So we're not going to go in and take out the Saddam Hussein of this scenario. Right now, we have killed Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, right? We haven't, however, taken out the overall clerical superstructure, as Morgan laid out. The new Ayatollah Ali Reza Arafi is in place. Whether he's going to be the new supreme leader or not, we don't know, but he's governing alongside the Chief Justice of the Iranian Supreme Court and the President Masoud Pezeshkian, who, by the way, the U.S. and Israel said we were targeting. We haven't killed him as yet. But those three are now in place. They took the bold action of having a meeting and put pictures of it out to demonstrate that, hey, look, you may have killed the supreme leader at a different meeting, but we're still here. We're still acting. So the question is Kim Dozier on CNN this morning said something like, is the U.S. going to do a Delcy, right? Are we going to put in place just another member of this regime who will be our proxy, or are we actually going to replace the regime or seek to replace the regime with somebody else? The president was very clear about this. He called on the Iranian people to rise up after the U.S. was done with its bombing and to take control of their country. That, of course, is putting the pressure on these folks who face a huge and very aggressive secret police and military in the country, with the idea that we'll have decimated it. But the question is, will we? We haven't yet. The question is, will we, over this next sort of 2, 3, 4 weeks, decimate the military such that the Iranian people can actually rise up? And to Morgan's point, will we through covert action, through our Israeli allies or the like, give them the weapons and support they need to actually do that? There's no evidence today, again, it's obviously it would be covert, that we're actually doing that. And so the question is, who in the inside do we have? Who's our chosen, leader, or who will the Iranian people choose, right? And will we be able to support that person? There were a lot of protests. I was at the Munich Security Conference a couple of weeks ago. There were a lot of protests there in Munich supporting the former Shah of Iran and his son, who actually lives here in Northern Virginia, has for many, many years. A lot of Iranian expatriates have his picture up in their house as a sort of king-like figure. There are a lot of people who expect the Shah to return. That would be a real challenge, because while the Shah was really beneficial for a lot of religious minorities in the region, he also had a very aggressive secret police, the Savak, that were reviled as well. And so now the question becomes, who's that leader? Who's that group? Is there enough consensus? To Morgan's point, the opposition is fragmented. Will they be able to pull together? Will the U.S. support them? These are all open questions. Remember, President Trump a few weeks ago said help is on the way, and now airstrikes have arrived. Is that the kind of help the Iranian people need to rise up? The young people in Iran, the majority of Iran is increasingly younger and younger. They prefer blue jeans over hijabs. They prefer rock music over Quranic ayats. The question is, will they actually be able to control their own country? That remains to be seen. So while I'm hopeful that Morgan's right, that we're seeing the end of this theocratic regime, not positive that's the case, not even positive that's what the Trump administration is aiming for if they, quote unquote, do a Delcy.
All right. One of the fascinating things for me of the last 48 hours is that, Iran has been basically allied with China and Russia for several years and has kind of formed this axis of bad guys. Neither China nor Russia have lifted a finger to help Iran here in its time of great turmoil and distress. Are either of you worried about the possibility that Beijing or Moscow are going to do something here to bolster what's left of the Ayatollah's regime?
So I think there might be a shortage on shaheds for Russia and Ukraine here. Bad joke. With that said, I think, look, China is going to be, I think, hurt specifically when it comes to oil and energy production. China, North Korea get a lot of their oil from Iran. And so I think this is going to play a really interesting this is going to play into global politics. I mean, obviously, we also took out Maduro, and China also got a lot of their oil from Venezuela. So I'll be interested to see how China responds to this, just given, they need to import a lot of oil for their own domestic consumption. So I think that's frankly what I'm going to be paying closer attention to moving forward. Also, I joke about the shahed shortage given in Russia, but ultimately I think that relationship will remain strong, particularly just because Iran does rely on Iran does rely on Russia for a lot of its military equipment as well.
Jamil, are you as sanguine about this as Morgan is?
Yeah, I think Morgan's right. I mean, I think it's interesting that the Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, said, well, look, we have a mutual defense treaty or a defense treaty with Iran, but that was signed with Ali Khamenei, and where's that guy now? He literally said that from the podium in Moscow. So clearly the Russians are not coming to Iran's aid, which is funny because, of course, Iranian generals were on the ground in Ukraine training Russian military operatives, how to use the Shahed drones. Those Shahed drones, to Morgan's point, are now flying all over the Middle East, hitting American allies and other friends in the region, hitting commercial facilities, hitting civilian facilities. And so there are not going to be any Shaheds left for Russia. Russia's making some of its own as well. But what's really interesting about the Shaheds, interestingly, is the U.S. actually created a bunch of Shahed clones, the Lucas program, and has been deploying them in the region, sort of giving Iran a taste of its own medicine. So we'll see how this all plays out. But I don't see Russia or China coming to Iran's aid anytime soon. They do appear increasingly to be an island of their own. And by hitting the Arab allies who had largely stayed out of this fight at civilian facilities alike, it's one thing to hit American facilities in those regions. That's to be expected. To be hitting civilian facilities, that's a big mistake for Iran. They're trying to draw them in, trying to put pressure on the United States. It's going to actually hit them back in the face. They're going to align Israel, the U.S., and our Arab friends against Iran, as they were all historically been allied. This is a huge mistake. They're causing their own problems here.
Yeah, and Iran, at least for now, has shut down apparently the Strait of Hormuz and limited shipping. That's actually going to negatively impact China. So it's really hard to see how Iran is going to be able to help itself with its allies. However, it's go ahead, Jamil.
So that's interesting. I hadn't heard they shut down the Straits of Hormuz. I do know that they had hit a tanker. They've also now used an explosive boat to blow up another tanker. So they're clearly doing stuff in the thing. I hadn't realized they had closed the straits, and it hasn't appeared, at least thus far, to what I've heard, but maybe you've heard something different, Les, that they're mining the Persian Gulf, which as you know, they did back in the 80s. So we'll see if that's certainly a possibility. I hadn't heard they would actually close it. If they did, that's obviously going to be a huge problem for the world. Oil prices are up 7, 8, 9% this morning on the world markets. So we'll see how that plays out as well.
Yeah, and let's just remind everyone, it's war. It's impossible to predict what's going to happen next, as much as we try to, and we could be talking about completely different developments on Wednesday when we have our next podcast. And folks should just be kind of grounded that it's as kind of upbeat as we may be in this podcast, it is possible that things take a turn here that's not great for the United States. So that with that cautionary note, that is a wrap. Yes, Jamil, please proceed.
One last thing on that point. We did just see a terrible incident where 3 American fighter jets, F-15s, were shot down by Kuwaiti defense systems that we gave them. That's obviously a huge problem. Although it looks like all the pilots, the 6 pilots in those F-15s survived, but that's obviously friendly fire is obviously a big problem too. So that's a real concern. You're right to raise that issue.
And 3 American service personnel have been killed so far in the fighting. President Trump has been careful to point out that that's likely to increase over time. It is war, and we do all have to be mindful of how grave a situation it is. Okay, that's a wrap. Thanks always to Kelly Crowley, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Wednesday, March 4th, for another episode of Fault Lines, probably talking about very similar issues. The National Security in Suits podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America.